Hi, I'm Nikki from Teaching Autism, and welcome to the Autism and Special Education Community Podcast. Are you an autism or special education professional? Are you a teacher or therapist looking for support and new ideas? You may even be a parent, family member, or carer. This podcast is perfect to help you find out more information, support, and get some of your questions answered. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my Teaching Autism and Special Education Community podcast. I am so excited to have Jenny Friedman on the show today, who is a specialised autism nutritionist. I can't wait for you to hear all about her fantastic interview and the work that she does. Without further ado, here's Jenny. Thank you for coming onto the podcast today, Jenny. Could you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I am a registered dietitian, which is kind of a fancy name and an official name for a nutritionist here in the States. And I work with children who have autism. I focus on expanding their diets and overcoming challenges to eating, in addition to improving diets so that they can feel their best and families can enjoy meals together and have eating be a fun and pleasurable experience.
That is such a great job to have, because I know diet and nutrition is always one of the most complicated things with some of our autistic children and students as well, and even some of our autistic adults. And I don't think we actually have many like you here in the UK. Like, you are the first one I've come across, and it's so exciting to know that you sort of specialise in autism. So I can imagine you're quite high in demand for both families and schools as well.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, part of what led me and brought me to this area was that there are not a lot of people doing it. And it was something that kept finding me, and it has evolved a lot into an area and a direction that I wasn't anticipating initially. So that just shows that you're totally right, that there is definitely a need and that this population hasn't really been served specifically before.
Definitely. And I think by having you sort of specialize in autism, it's that little bit of a comfort as well for people to come to you, because I think a lot of families and parents especially find it quite nerve-wracking to take their children to the doctors when they don't maybe understand that the dietary and nutrition issues can be down to their autism and sensory issues. So by you having that experience as well, it means you can bring a lot to the table for them.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And, one of the things that a lot of the families I work with, the parents tell me, is that doctors don't seem to pick up on the nuances and the potential severity of what's going on. And doctors are used to seeing picky eating and eating trouble in a lot of children. And as long as kids are staying on their growth curve and are growing adequately and seem to be healthy, it's not really a concern. And often parents are hearing, oh, they'll grow out of it. This is common. It's just a phase. And for a vast majority of the population, that is true. But then there's a portion like kids with autism and other developmental or sensory challenges who this is not a phase for. And it is important to catch it early and to work with somebody who can help.
Definitely. And I think you are able to provide that to them. So would you say that you work more with families, or do you work with schools as well?
I work primarily with families at this point, and schools is something on my radar. So I would love to be able to do that more. But I do work mostly with families. And school is something that we do talk about a lot, though, because it's a whole other eating environment. There are a lot of challenges that can come with that for anyone. So it's definitely a topic that we discuss frequently.
Definitely. I think it's so different between home and school. And there are a lot of extra challenges, like you said, the two different environments and foods on offer. But it would be great to see you at schools as well. I'm sure teachers and teaching staff and any professional would love to have someone like you who could come in and sort of even offer them training maybe, because I know a lot of our teaching staff get stuck and they don't know how to help the children with their eating and their diet and different foods.
Yes, definitely. I would love to do that. So thank you for putting that out there.
We will make that happen, I'm sure, one day. So I wanted to sort of pick your mind, because a lot of our children and adults as well who are diagnosed with autism, diet, it seems to be a huge struggle for a huge majority of them, I would say, and especially trying new foods, or they will only stick to certain types of food and have like a certain favorite food. And some even eat only a certain color food. Why do you think that is? Do you have any sort of ideas or thoughts behind it?
I have many. So it could be for a variety and even a number of reasons. So based on the research and also my personal experience, we tend to see sensory issues can be a really big factor. So that's where you alluded to certain textures or even colors of food and certain types of foods. So any sort of sensory symptoms and sensitivities, eating really is not one of the few, but an experience that engages every single sensory experience. And so sensory is a big one. It can also be that, that kind of preference for routine. Anxiety is a possible factor as well. I was just talking to a parent yesterday who said, I don't know if sensory is the issue. I see some anxiety and I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg. Which one, is he anxious and therefore it's difficult to eat? Or did he have a bad experience and therefore is anxious? And I mean, those are definitely the primary ones that I see, but there's also potential GI issues. So a lot of kids have upset stomach or reflux, and that can also impact what you want to eat. Possible nutrient deficiencies can also impact appetite and taste. So those are probably what I see being the biggest and what research supports as being some of the most prominent issues that are unique to this population.
Definitely. I think I agree with all of those. We sort of see those things, but trying to get to the bottom of things is harder, especially when some of our children are nonverbal. And I have quite a funny story here, which I don't know if is relevant to this, but growing up, I had a lot of issues with certain foods. Now, by no means, I'm not autistic, anything like that. And I still have it now with texture. So rice pudding, custard, cream, yogurt. If someone brings that within 5 meters, I am gagging. And I don't know how many times I've actually physically vomited when someone has forced me to eat those. And I know a lot of our children, they go through that as well. And when I go out to schools, we sort of see the teachers maybe not forcing the foods on the children, but they say, you need to eat this, you need to eat that. And I see the children gagging. And I'm one of those who I don't believe we should force it on children, because I know what that gag is like, that vomit. What would you say to people who think that by being quite forceful with food for trying things, that's maybe not the right approach, and how to do it instead of that forcing?
Yeah, definitely. So I agree with you. I agree that that is not the right approach. And one of the reasons that that could actually be not safe, and I forgot to mention, is oral motor deficit. So not having the proper ability to chew and swallow and maneuver food in the mouth is one other reason that we could see some of these eating challenges. And so that's a possibility too. If you're forcing food on someone, they really don't have the capability to eat that food, that's a potential hazard. So beyond that, we're getting back to the anxiety. If you're forcing somebody to eat something and forcing them to feel uncomfortable, that won't result in a positive experience. And I think that that can worsen the situation. So there's, the way to do it better, there are several ways, but one of the kind of guiding principles for feeding, it comes from a woman named Ellen Satter, and she created the division of responsibility in feeding. And the concept is that the parent or caregiver, teacher, whoever is in charge, the grown-up usually, gets to say what is being served for the meal, where it is being served, and when it is being served. And it is up to the child to decide whether they want to eat and how much they want to eat. So that's something that I like to think about as when thinking about that forcing the behavior. It's a great way to keep everybody feeling safe and comfortable.
Definitely. And I would sort of touch on that, giving them that control as well, where the children could choose their own foods, because I feel like we take a lot of control away from our children through the day in schools where, they have to be working now, they have to go playtime now, lunchtime is now. That's a lot of control they lose. But by giving that control back, where they can choose what they're eating, how much they're eating, I think it just gives them that little bit of independence and will win them round a little bit maybe.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's a huge component of eating as well. And part of why we tend to see picky eating come up around the age of 2 is because that is really the one area, as you said, where kids have the ability to have some control in their life. Every single part of their day is dictated by somebody else. So this is the one area where they can say yes or no, I want this or that, this is going in or not. And that's definitely something worth respecting. And in any way, involving children in the food decisions and any aspect of food preparation and decision making, menu planning is really helpful for encouraging eating. The more they're involved, the more they are interested in eating.
Definitely. And I know with children that I work with, we feel that cooking has helped them try a lot of new foods because they're very much involved, and we take them shopping and they'll follow the shopping list and they'll pick up that food and then they'll take it back. They'll store the food. They use that food to make things, even if it's like something simple like a fruit salad. But I feel like involving them in that process, even if they're just smelling and touching the foods, I feel like that can just come on leaps and bounds and lead to eventually tasting things and exposing them.
Exactly. I can't agree with you more. And that is, you hit on so many things. So exactly, it's that start to finish experience, it's that exposure to food. So you mentioned, even if they're just smelling and touching it, that's the first step to overcoming some sensory aversions and leading up to eating the food. And then you're creating all these stories, you're creating some attachment to the food, you're really getting to know it. And the other really great thing, too, is that there's kind of low pressure and it's not necessarily about eating. So if you're in the kitchen cooking and you're saying, let's taste this, do we need to add more sauce to our pasta? Is it too spicy? Is it too salty? What does it need? You're not saying, please try this food you need to eat. You're instead creating this other experience. You're kind of playing scientist and you're encouraging eating and you're encouraging all of that interaction without explicitly saying and putting the pressure to eat on.
Definitely. And I think that links back to what you mentioned earlier then, with giving the children that control as well, where they can decide whether they're going to try it and decide whether to add something else. I think it is all about promoting that independence and giving them something to decide for themselves.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a huge part. So any opportunity in the day where there, it can be cleanup, cooking, shopping, gardening is a big one. Just playing with food, all of that is really helpful for building up that comfort with eating.
Definitely. And going back a little bit, I'm just going to backtrack to the sensory issues that we sort of discussed as well. And a lot of our children have very heightened senses. Now, through my years, I don't know if this is something that is worldwide, but through my years of working with our autistic children, I would say about 90% of children smell the food before they taste it. Now, what sort of background could you give on why maybe they would do that?
Well, I think so. Technically, I'm not going to say this really correctly, but most of our taste experience is actually happening through our smell. So it's, you can say maybe you're experiencing this now and you have a cold and you can't really smell something, you lose your ability to taste. So we're kind of doing that naturally anyway. And I don't know necessarily why that would be happening, but I totally agree. I hear about that a lot and I see that a lot. And my guess would be that putting something in your mouth is pretty intimate. There's a lot going on, and once it's there, it's there. But smelling something is a more comfortable first step and gives you a lot of information about what that food might be like once you're eating it. So I think that is just a way to prepare and inform the body of what's to come and help make the decision of, do I want to eat this and what's that going to feel like?
Definitely. Now you've said that, it does all sort of click. And it's interesting because as we've sort of watched the children do it over the years, I find our staff end up doing it as well because we're so intrigued. Why are they smelling it and what can they smell? It's intriguing the way that they sort of do things. And maybe another sensory sort of thing as well is where, like you've touched on, when you have a cold and you don't have that great sort of sense of taste. Now, I find a lot of our children are definitely different ends of this, and some really don't get the feedback that we would expect. Like some children find maybe crisps are way too strong a flavor for them, or chips over there in America. Mm-hmm. But then I've had children who will eat a bag of wasabi nuts and like we'll have one and we're nearly in tears from how the strength of them, and it won't even affect the child. Like he is under no illusion that those nuts are really strong in flavor. Do you think that plays into sort of trying new foods and diet as well?
That's huge, yes. And so that's a big part of what I work with, is finding flavors that are appropriate, more mild, or flavors that will, like you said, the really spicy nuts or a really strong texture that will wake up the sensory system. There's a lot that you can do, not my specialty, but also activities beforehand that can kind of prepare the body and get it into a more ready state to eat. And that's a huge thing, is finding the textures and flavors that work for someone. And this will play back to, it's usually not only a texture perception, but also sometimes those kids who have trouble sensing a really strong flavor might also have trouble sensing the food in their mouth. They just can't feel it in there. Maybe they also have trouble sensing when they're feeling hungry or when they're feeling full. And all of that will impact how they eat and how much they eat and what they want to eat. So it's it's very complicated. And as you see, it's really different for every child.
Definitely. And you're the first person to ever say about, maybe they can't sort of feel and sense that food in their mouth. And that is something that I wouldn't have thought of. But as soon as you've said it, it makes a lot of sense, especially when we often say like some of our children don't feel when someone brushes past them or touches them. And it can be the same in their mouth as well.
Definitely, definitely.
And touching on what you said, where some of our children don't understand maybe when they're hungry or realize when they're full, I have a lot of parents, families, and even teachers sort of reach out to me where the children or students in their class, they don't have a stop button and they just want to eat and eat and eat. And I know sometimes that can be down to maybe different medications and things, but what was sort of advice would you offer to someone whose child is just constantly wanting to eat and they don't know to stop?
So a couple of things is, number one, it's really helpful to set a schedule and have boundaries on eating times and times when you're not eating. So kids who graze all day long, who are snacking all day and eating every hour, will have trouble. They'll never really feel full or feel hungry. They're kind of somewhere always in the middle. So setting that boundary is really helpful to activate the appetite and to make sure that children are coming to meals hungry. So that's one way to sort of activate that hunger and help a child come to sense that. Another helpful way is to really exaggerate those experiences and to highlight your own experience and to have that discussion about it whenever you can. So there are definitely videos and books where kids are hungry, and it's helpful to read those books and have a conversation about it, or to talk about your own experiences. Oh, I'm feeling hungry and my tummy is rumbling, or make it age appropriate, but focus on what the body feels like. When my belly feels like this, or before meals, we need to feed it, and now it feels full. It's not making the noise. It feels comfortable. So any way that you can make it relatable and really reinforce those actions within the structure of meal times as well is helpful to get in touch with those hunger and fullness cues.
Those are great ideas, because I think maybe we don't realize to teach those sort of things, whereas we'll teach them about their feelings, happy, sad, we'll teach them life skills like washing their hands, but teaching like all those things you've just mentioned, those would be great even to fit into sort of morning or afternoon meetings in a classroom, little times, but it'll build upon every day then.
Definitely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that really speaks to the idea that a lot of us think that eating is something that comes naturally. And we, in a way, some babies, infants come out and they are ready to eat. But once it gets a little more complicated, eating is complicated. It's a really dynamic, skilled activity. And it's something that we do have to learn. And some kids might miss that opportunity, or it doesn't come as easily. And therefore, we really need to enforce that and teach that all the time until that skill is developed.
Definitely. I love that. Now, on my show, my blog, I like to sort of discuss the sort of autism myths. When people sort of think of autism and they sort of think back to experiences that they've seen on maybe TV, the news, the first things that come to them. And with diet, one of the main things, and it always comes up any training I've been on when children come to the class, is why do autistic children seem to prefer beige foods? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I have a blog post coming up about this, and I just posted on Instagram yesterday, so it's very relevant, and I love this question. And so it is, first of all, it's not universal at all. There are definitely kids who don't follow this diet, quote unquote, and who don't have these needs. But based on everything that we've said, it kind of makes sense. So number one, these foods don't challenge the visual sensory system. They are just easy to look at. They're safe. Number two, they don't really challenge the rest of the sensory system. They tend to be really easy to eat. So we're thinking chicken nuggets, crackers, pastas, maybe cheese. All of those don't require a lot of chewing skill. They tend to be very similar. So a lot of children tend to they have preferred brands of certain foods. And that's because that brand, it's partly because that brand, it's the same. Every single chicken nugget is exactly the same. So the child feels safe. They never have to reach out of that sensory comfort zone. It's something that they can chew without a lot of issue. Sometimes these foods tend to have those more strong flavors. They're really salty. They're just easy and consistent is kind of the number one. And in a nutshell, that is it. They're consistent. They're easy. They're non-threatening, and they taste good.
Definitely. And all that really does make sense. And it is, I don't know if you find it, that does seem to be the thing that comes up all the time with diet and children. But it was really interesting where you touched on the brands, because we had a child in our class who used to like a specific brand of crackers, and they can get quite pricey over here for the ones that he wanted, and he was eating quite a few of them. So his parents bought a cheaper brand, and they look the same, but the children know straight away that brand is different.
Yeah, they always know. Yeah, and that's, I think, partially due to the consistency and partially due to if a child kind of does have that preference for routine and sameness, it can be, it can be both. And also sometimes just seeing the bag is a trigger to eat. And when something is changed, it's a different bag, it's a different box, it's a different color. It's kind of like, wait, what do we do here? I don't know what's happening. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what to expect. So there's a lot going in there.
Definitely. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
So now we have some questions from some of our listeners, if you wouldn't mind.
I'd love to.
So the first is, a lady is asking, how can parents help their children get the nutrients that they need when their diet may be lacking them because of food and sensory issues?
So the hardest but best answer is work on expanding the diet. So a lot of what we said here, those exposures to food, the learning about it and the cooking type experiences is a great way to help expand the diet. It is always, well, I shouldn't say always, but there's usually no harm to taking a multivitamin, and that is helpful, especially for kids who are missing out maybe on fruits and vegetables. And, it's tricky. I don't advocate for hiding nutrients or hiding fruits and vegetables. It's a big thing. These are, sneaking pureed spinach into muffins or pancakes. I don't support hiding that food and not letting your child know, because that can break some trust. But I do think that it's a great opportunity if you can work with your child to make some of those food additions. A child's pancakes is just an easy example where you can add in some fruit puree, add things into soups and sauces. But I would do that with the help of your child.
Definitely. And when we're introducing like fruits and things in class that we know are going to be difficult, we sort of like to make fun cookery sessions, and the children can make maybe their favorite characters. And even if they don't eat them, we just try to make it more fun for them. So they're not just seeing fruit on the table and having a panic that we are having fruit.
Exactly. And that's my number one, is it doesn't always have to be about eating. when you can use food as props for play and for learning, that all helps to overcome a lot of the aversions. So I love that you're doing that. And there's never any pressure to eat when you're doing those situations. But if just so happens somebody wants to take a bite, that's amazing. It's exactly what you want, but there's absolutely no pressure. It's just a learning experience and a way to get more exposures to food.
Definitely. And it's sometimes we use fruit that the children may never have even seen before. So just exposing them does really help.
Mm-hmm.
So our next question from another listener is, she is asking specifically about gluten-free diets, and she is sort of wondering what your thoughts are on gluten-free diets for our children, and has there been any proof that this helps to decrease meltdowns with our children?
So it's a great question, and it's a little complicated. The research is pretty mixed, and I would say anecdotally, so stories from parents tend to be the strongest supporters of the gluten-free diet, where they do see a lot of improvement. Specific for meltdowns, that can depend because every child responds differently, but sometimes we're getting reports of improved attention, improved behavior, improved verbal skills, improved eye contact, improved belly issues. So there seems to be some potential value, although it's not universal. My concern is that, going back to the beige foods, a lot of kids tend to have diets very heavy and rich in carbohydrates and starches and foods that may contain gluten. And if you cut out all of those foods and try to replace them with alternatives that may not be accepted, you've eliminated a huge source of nutrition for the child. So I don't recommend even looking into a special diet or any kind of elimination diet until you have a really solid basis of accepted foods in a vast, in a variety of the food groups. So when there's no overall nutrition issue or growth concern, it can definitely be worth a shot because you don't have a lot to lose. There have been a few studies where we've seen nutrient deficiencies in kids who have been on special diets, but that's, again, probably leading back to the fact that there wasn't a great foundational diet there to begin with.
Definitely. I'm sure that will be really helpful. I know she was sort of looking into it and trying to see both sides of it, I think, rather than just, doing a little bit of research. And our final question, this is a parent who's asking specifically for their child. Their child only eats baby food pouches, but they are now 7 years of age. They have tried all sorts of different things to get him onto solid foods and followed the usual process, but he doesn't even have the pouches warmed up. He will eat these cold, and it's only one type of baby pouch and one brand. They have managed to get him to eat toast maybe once a week, but this totally depends on him. It's on his terms. They were just wondering, what sort of process would you sort of recommend to try to wean him off the pouches onto something similar that maybe they haven't thought of?
Yeah, that is tricky, and it's not unique. That's definitely not the first time that I've heard that story. So the first thing that I recommend, if it hasn't been done already, is just checking in with a doctor and maybe an occupational therapist. This triggers to me that maybe the child is lacking some of the necessary skills to chew more complex food. Not necessarily the case, but that could definitely be part of it. If chewing is difficult, then the child doesn't even want to try that. If the child maybe just has difficulty supporting his or her body, then that could lead into it. So want to get those oral and motor skills checked out. And then the transition is going to have to be really, really slow. So again, I go back to all of those food exposures with the cooking and the shopping or gardening and food play, arts and crafts. That stuff is definitely always helpful. There's a lot of things. So I would say to slowly transition, if you could, from somehow making one small change to the food, if it's changing, removing the food from the special container or trying a little bit of a different color or flavor. And then making sure also a big barrier that I see is because a lot of kids do struggle to eat with others and struggle being near other food, kids tend to be eating the same foods all the time, getting their 5 accepted foods at every meal and eating alone. And like I said, eating is a skill and it's also a social activity. So it's helpful to eat in front of your child, eat with your child, and show and demonstrate those eating skills and demonstrate what it's like to have a varied diet. That's something that won't be an overnight fix, but is part of raising a child who knows how to eat and is open to eating new foods.
Those are all fantastic recommendations, and I'm sure they will really appreciate sort of trying all those things as well. So I know that you offer a sort of freebie on your Instagram. Where can people find you and get access to all the sort of services that you offer?
Great. Yeah. So you can definitely find me on Instagram. I'm at autism.nutritionist. And you can find me on my website. There's lots of information and great resources there as well. And that website is jennyfriedmannutrition.com. And Friedman is spelled like fried, like a fried egg, fried man.
Brilliant. And I will link those in the show notes as well for people to find you there a little bit easier. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Jenny, and giving up time to talk to me and for my listeners to sort of get more information about nutrition and diet as well.
It was my pleasure, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed listening to my interview with Jenny Friedman, who is an autism nutrition specialist. I hope this podcast episode has provided you with some new ideas to try with your children and students. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you again soon.